Hey, before we slip into chainmail and chamber pots, take a moment, only if you feel like it, to subscribe, drop a like, and maybe even ring that little bell. If you're listening from a distant place or at some strange hour, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Now, dim your lights, pull the covers just a little tighter, and let's drift together into the world of medieval nobility. A world far less glamorous than your history book portraits would have you believe. You wake up wrapped in something that could generously be called bedding. Coarse wool that scratches like hay and smells like old stone and candle smoke. Your back aches from the oak plank beneath the thin, feather-stuffed mattress, and the early morning cold curls around your limbs like a snake. There is no glass in your window, just thick wooden shutters that leak drafts of damp, chilled air, laced with the scent of wet earth and mildew from the courtyard below. The light is pale and shy, creeping through the narrow arrow slits in your chamber wall, not quite strong enough to chase away the shadows that cling to the tapestries. Your name is known. You are a noble, a lord, a highborn. Congratulations. That means you'll never dig your own grave with a shovel. But don't get too comfortable, because with that name comes expectation, ceremony, discomfort, and the ever-present threat of being poisoned before breakfast. There is a weight around your chest. Not emotion, not memory, but literal weight. The tunic you forgot to take off last night. Embroidered with golden thread, stiff at the collar, heavy with status. You slept in it because changing clothes is a process, and undressing without assistance is beneath your station. Somewhere in the chamber, wax has melted down from a trio of tall candles, now solidified in droopy stalactites over the edge of a wrought iron sconce. Their scent, resin and old fat, still lingers. The stone beneath your bare feet is cold as river water. You shuffle toward the basin set in a carved stand near the fireplace, where yesterday's water has grown a thin skin of ice. You dip your fingers in, trying to wash the sleep from your face, but all it does is make you shiver harder. There's no such thing as hot running water in your world. Fire is a luxury rationed for the hearth and the kitchen. Cleanliness, an aspiration, not a routine. The chamber is dim, lined with stiff wooden furniture. A high-backed chair carved with hunting scenes, a writing desk stacked with scrolls you'll pretend to read later, and a chest filled with heavy, formal garments that itch like nettles and cost more than a peasant makes in 3 lifetimes. You glance at your boots, still crusted with yesterday's ride through muddy fields. No servant came to clean them overnight. A quiet reminder that loyalty, like soap, is never guaranteed. There's a knock. Not loud, not soft, just urgent. A pause, then another. It's your chamberlain, his voice muffled through the door. My lord, you must rise. There is unrest in the courtyard. You sigh. There goes the idea of a peaceful morning. You step toward the door, the floor creaking beneath you like the hull of an old ship. Outside, distant hooves echo on cobblestones. Metal clinks. Soldiers adjusting their armor. Someone shouts. Another knock, louder this time. You open the door. Your chamberlain's face is pale. He doesn't bow. He never forgets to bow. My lord, he says, eyes not meeting yours. They're demanding your presence. The abbot, the blacksmith, the steward, all at once. You blink. All at once? Yes, my lord. Your mind races. You're still half asleep, still shivering, still vaguely tasting the sour wine from last night's feast. But protocol demands dignity. You nod, wave him away. He hesitates, then disappears down the hallway, boots slapping the stone. You stare out the window. The sun is barely up, but the world is already demanding things from you. Your title, your attention, your judgment. You haven't even had breakfast, but before you step away from the chamber's weak warmth, you pause to listen. The courtyard sounds strange this morning. Not chaotic, but sharp, focused. Like a dozen conversations all whispering toward a single, invisible center. Your eyes drift toward the long, narrow hall at the end of the corridor. A tapestry flutters as if someone just passed. Strange. Someone's always watching in this place, and you can't help but wonder, what did a medieval university look like back then? And more importantly, who was allowed through its gates? Ah, yes, the university. You'll be disappointed to know that in the 14th century, the word didn't mean grand marble halls or leather-bound books lined in mahogany libraries. Number A University was more like a smoky hall full of robed men arguing in Latin while scratching lice from their scalps. And you, as a noble, might fund one, but rarely attend. Learning was a pursuit for clerics and scholars. Unless you were destined for the church, your education stopped where your sword began. But let's talk about something far more immediate, getting dressed. You stand in the middle of your chamber, staring at the pile of garments your attendant has laid out. Wool, all of it, heavy, coarse, dyed in subdued shades of mud and oxblood. The tunic smells faintly of lanolin and fireplace ash. Its collar is stiff, trimmed with embroidery that would have cost a carpenter his entire year's wage. You rub the fabric between your fingers, prickly. Already your skin itches, but complaining would be improper. Nobility suffers in silence, remember. Your underclothes are linen, if you're lucky, but they're rarely laundered. And by laundered, you know that means they were soaked in a wooden vat with ash soap, beaten with paddles, and laid out to dry in the same courtyard the pigs rooed through. They're cleanish, at least they're dry. You begin layering, undershirt, over tunic, hose, doublet. Each piece designed not for comfort, but to broadcast your status. Buttons are precious, often made from bone or pewter. You fumble them into place as the cold air sneaks down your back. No socks. Your boots, when you find them, are stiff with yesterday's sweat and the dust of the yard. You wiggle your toes inside them and wince. Now the belt. Wide leather, ornate, decorative as much as functional. It cinches your middle like a corset, pushing yesterday's stew back up your throat. You exhale and lean into the mirror. Not made of glass, of course, polished metal. Your reflection is warped, like a spirit seen in water. And just as you reach for your cloak, your scalp twitches. Ah, yes, the lice. You scratch discreetly. It's a daily irritation, shared among lords and ladies alike. Combs help when made of fine-toothed bone, but there's no real cure. Baths, rare. Soap, harsh. Medieval soap is often a lump of animal fat mixed with wood, ash and herbs, and it burns if you use too much. You remember the sting on your neck from last week's attempt. A proper bath means boiling water in cauldrons and pouring it into a wooden tub. An endeavour so exhausting it's reserved for feast days, weddings, or near-death illnesses. Most days, your grooming consists of wiping your face with a damp cloth, brushing your teeth with a twig soaked in vinegar, and dusting your hair with scented powder to mask the grime. Your armpits ache with a dull humidity already. There's no deodorant, only lavender sachets or sprigs of rosemary tucked into your undergarments. Today, you opt for cloves, pressing a few buds into the hem of your tunic. It doesn't help much. Outside the window, you hear the rattle of wooden wheels and the bray of a stubborn mule. The castle is waking up. Somewhere in the lower courtyard, servants scrub pans with sand and ashes. The smell of iron and wet clay drifts in. Not unpleasant, but far from refreshing. You run your fingers along your jaw. You shaved 3 days ago. The razor is a strip of iron, more likely to nick than cut, and your chin still carries the memory of the last mishap. You dab at it with a cloth and glance at the door. Time to go. But your stomach rumbles, loudly, as if announcing a rebellion of its own. You haven't eaten since dusk yesterday. Dinner was thin broth, hard cheese and bread tougher than saddle leather. And breakfast. What is breakfast for a noble like you in this cold, tiled stone world? Would you eat meat first thing in the morning, or something? Stranger, breakfast, as it turns out, is not quite the feast your groaning stomach imagined. You make your way down the cold corridor, your boots clicking unevenly on the stone floor, the walls echoing with muffled voices and distant clangs of iron tools. When you reach the solar, a room meant for private meals and light, not that much of it ever makes it past the arrow slits. You find a long table already set. Thin rushes cover the floor, recently replaced, still carrying the sweet sour scent of crushed herbs. Mint, marjoram, a hint of something musky. Maybe wild thyme, maybe the Chamberlain's boots. Hard to say. You take your place at the head of the table. The wooden chair creaks under your weight. Your fingers are stiff from the chill, and the silverware is colder still, though silver, even tarnished, is a blessing. Most lords use pewter or even wood. The first dish arrives, a trencher of bread, day old, perhaps 2, dense, crusty, unevenly baked. You tear at it with your teeth, and the edge scrapes the roof of your mouth. The center is soft, yes, but carries the sourness of overproofed yeast. You chew slowly, glancing at the servant boy, who lowers a bowl of pottage beside you. He bows, then disappears. Pottage. Again. A thin stew made of onions, leeks, bits of turnip, and traces of last week's rabbit. You lean in. The steam is faint, rising like a ghost. It smells of boiled roots and a dash of parsley. Not unpleasant, but far from tempting. The texture is something between gruel and regret. Then comes meat. Your eyes widen a little. Bacon. Real bacon, or something they insist is. It gleams with fat under the dim candlelight, still sizzling faintly. You pick up the strip with 2 fingers, but there's an odd film on it. Grease, yes, but also something chalky, like ash. The taste? Smoky, salty, but halfway through chewing, there's a whisper of something off, a touch of sourness beneath the spice. A nobleman's tongue is trained to detect such things, even when masked beneath clove and cumin. You set it down. Across from you, your steward eats more confidently, tearing into the bacon like it owes him money. He grunts approvingly and reaches for his goblet. Warm, flat, breakfast beer. Safer than water, they always say. And it's true. Water here is for washing dishes, not organs. So you drink the ale, sip by sip. It coats your mouth in bitterness, chases away the film of the bacon. But not entirely. Next comes cheese, hard, waxy, thick-rinded. Made weeks ago, maybe months. You run your knife through it, and the blade squeals like it's resisting. The cheese crumbles, revealing veins of blue inside. Moldavian, but not the good kind. You eat anyway. You always eat. Nobility does not pick through food like a child. That's for the lower tables. You look down the length of the room. Servants sit on benches at the far end, heads bowed. They have oat cakes, maybe dried peas. No meat, no cheese. Certainly no spices. You wonder, for a moment, how many of them are hungrier than you. But the thought passes quickly, like a shadow crossing a candle. Then someone coughs. Loud, wet, violent. It's the steward. He sets down his goblet, eyes wide, hand to his chest. He coughs again, this time harsher. A splatter of ale lands on the tablecloth. Someone gasps. A scullery maid freezes mid-step. The room stills. You shift in your chair, heart tapping once, twice, heavier now. Could it be? Surely not. Not poison. But then again, what else would explain the bitter metallic taste now coating your tongue? The steward, still coughing, is led away by two servants. His face has turned an unpleasant shade of grey, and the wet cloth held to his lips tells you more than you wish to know. But no one panics. This isn't the first time someone has fallen ill at breakfast. Food poisoning, most likely. Or perhaps just bad ale. You stay seated. A lord never runs from discomfort. Besides, there are other matters more pressing than a man's breakfast blunder. Matters of your estate, your name, your power. Moments later, you're in the council chamber. A rectangular room lined with thick beams of dark wood, their surfaces scarred from centuries of elbows, goblets, and whispered schemes. The air is thick with the scent of tallow candles and damp wool. Dust motes dance lazily in the weak light filtering through a stained glass window. Your family crest, glowing red and gold. You sit at the high-backed chair at the end of the table. Around you, familiar faces, men who have stood beside your father, others who were raised with you since youth. You nod at each in turn, but today their eyes seem different, cooler, calculating, like merchants weighing grain. The conversation begins with land disputes. A tenant farmer near the river claims your steward doubled the tax on barley. The steward, yes, the same one now coughing up his soul in the infirmary, isn't here to defend himself. Convenient. You ask your reeve to investigate, but the knight at your left, Sir Olwyn, scoffs. Another investigation? We already bleed coin for your father's mercy. Must we now coddle the peasantry too? You feel the room stiffen. Sir Alwyn's tone is not respectful. It is sharp, edged. You keep your face neutral. Next, harvest yields. Not enough grain stored. The granaries need repairs. Timber prices have risen. Your treasurer murmurs something about diverting funds from the tower restoration. Would you have us eat stone next winter? You ask, voice calm. He lowers his eyes. Then comes the final blow. Letters from the northern border. A neighbouring baron has built a second fortification near your land. No declaration of intent, no courtesy. He dares, mutters the priest, fingers folded over his belly. He tests your silence. You nod slowly, and then it happens. Your chancellor leans in, too casually. My lord, he says, drawing out the syllables like honey dripping from a spoon. Perhaps it is time to formalize our alliances. A marriage, perhaps. Or even a council vote on military deployment to show unity. Unity. That word hangs heavy, because unity implies dissent. And a vote. You are not their equal. You are their lord. You glance down the table. They avoid your eyes. Every man here has his own interests. Some want more land, some want fewer taxes, and some want your chair. The meeting ends with forced bows and clipped farewells. One by one, they file out. The chamber empties. But the silence they leave behind is louder than their words. You remain seated, fingertips resting on the polished surface of the table, eyes fixed on nothing. You remember, suddenly, what your father once told you. The real battles are never fought with swords. Your lips twitch, not quite a smile. Just as you rise to leave, a folded parchment is slid beneath your door. No seal, no name. Your fingers hesitate over the edge. What message arrives in secret? On the morning your allies turn their eyes away. You unfold the parchment. No seal, no crest. Just ink, hurriedly scribbled, with an uneven hand. 3 lines, no greeting. They meet after Vespers. The old barn behind the tannery. Your name was spoken. That's it. You fold it silently and slide it into your sleeve. Within the hour, you're on horseback, a fur-lined cloak pulled tight against the wind. You've told the stable master you're inspecting the outer fields, but really, you need distance, fresh air, eyes away from watching walls and whispering halls. The morning is grey, the kind of colour that seeps into your bones. The road narrows into a track of packed mud, glazed with last night's frost. The hooves of your horse strike the earth with dull, wet thuds. Every breath you draw tastes of wet leaves, distant smoke, and the faint bitterness of manure. Around you, fields lie fallow. Winter is near, and the land rests whether you permit it or not. You pass through your tenant village, and here the world shifts. The stone gives way to packed dirt. Timber-framed huts lean into one another like tired old men. The roofs sag under layers of thatch, darkened with soot. Chickens scatter as you ride by, clucking with theatrical offence. A dog barks once, then disappears behind a pile of firewood. The air smells of boiled cabbage, damp wool, and human effort. You feel it wrap around you, real life, stripped of the silk and oil of the castle. Children glance up from their play, mud staining their tunics. One boy picks his nose and stares at you with eyes too old for his face. A woman stirs a pot over an open flame, using a stick rather than a spoon. Her hands are red with cold. She doesn't look up. You slow your horse near the well. Two men haul buckets of water, muscles straining under wet hemp. Their backs are bent not from age, but from repetition. Years of pulling, lifting, surviving. One of them nods. The other just keeps working. You dismount and walk through the village. The ground squelches beneath your boots, and each step sends up the smell of rotted straw and earth. A piglet noses past your ankle, snorting. You glance up and meet the eyes of the reeve, your appointed village manager. "My lord," he says with a bow. His breath clouds the air. "The tithes were gathered last week. Grain's already at the storehouse." You nod. But you don't ask about grain. Instead, you motion toward the huts. "How many hands working this winter?" 54, plus 6 babes. 4 more widows than last year." You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. "Plague took 2. 1 fell into the river, and 1 left." "Left?" You know what that means. A runaway. Illegal. Punishable. But you let it go. You make your way toward the far end of the village, where the land dips toward a bend in the river. Here, the huts are smaller, cruder. The thatch is patchy, and the walls bulge outward. A girl hammers a plank into place with a stone. No shoes. You stop. And that's when he steps forward. Not the reeve. Not a squire. A peasant. Thick-armed, sun-darkened. His tunic is patched at the shoulders, and his boots are more whole than leather. He removes his cap, respectfully, and speaks. "My lord," he says. His voice is steady. "If I may." You nod slowly. He clears his throat. "We can't make the tax this winter. Not with the frost killing the roots early and the last harvest going to your levies. We're willing to offer labour in place of coin." You hear the reeve shift behind you. A faint intake of breath. The man continues. "Just enough relief to survive till thaw." You look around. Faces appear, silent, watching. A dozen villagers. No one speaks. No one blinks. This is not rebellion, but it is close. And now, in this chilled silence, with mud on your boots and eyes staring back not with fear, but exhaustion, you must choose your words. But what can you say that doesn't fracture the very foundation beneath your saddle? You didn't answer him. Not directly. You turned slowly and looked out across the fields, the dry, brittle stalks left behind by a harvest too thin. and a season too short. You nodded. Once. The Reeve opened his mouth to protest, but the look you gave him clamped it shut. The villagers didn't cheer. They didn't smile. They simply exhaled, like a kettle removed from fire, the kind of thanks too fragile for words. You mounted your horse and left them behind, but you didn't return to the castle just yet. You turned east toward the outpost lands, telling your guard that you checked the southern watchtower before nightfall. A lord has duties after all, and sometimes those duties mean riding half a day through mud, thorns and weather that can't decide if it's rain or air that simply weeps. The road, if you can call it that, is a ribbon of churned soil and stones, wide enough for a single cart, and just narrow enough to make passing another rider a gamble. The wheels of previous wagons have left grooves so deep your horse stumbles in and out of them like stepping over sleeping pigs. Your mount, an old grey mare with more scars than sense, snorts and jerks her head at every puddle. Her shoes clink against unseen stones. Every third step is uneven, a slight limp from a split hoof you noticed 2 weeks ago, but haven't yet replaced. The farrier's been ill. Again, you press on. To your left, a hedgerow lines the edge of a fallow field. Briars twist through the branches, and tiny birds flit between the leaves. You hear the rustle of something larger, maybe a badger, maybe not. You grip your reins tighter. Travel in these parts is always a quiet negotiation with fate. There are no road markers, no signs, just memory and instinct. A crooked elm tree, a mossy rock shaped vaguely like a helmet, a stream that always floods after the first frost. You remember your father's words. The land remembers. You just need to listen. But you wonder, what if it forgets you? You pass a cart, overturned, wheels shattered. No oxen in sight, no driver either. Just a broken barrel half sunk in the mud, its contents long scavenged by foxes or desperate hands. The wind shifts, carries the scent of wet bark, sweat, and something older. Decomposing leaves mixed with the iron tang of rust. You glance at your guard. He says nothing. Neither do you. There are no inns, not proper ones. A tavern here is a thatched room with 3 stools, a leaking roof, and watered-down ale served by a woman who's seen too many winters and not enough peace. Beds, if you're lucky, a pile of straw in the corner, already warm from the last traveller, so you ride on. The rain begins softly, like an apology. First on your cloak, then on your gloves. Your hood droops. Water gathers in your collar. Soon the mud deepens, sucking at the hooves like hungry mouths. The mare whinnies. You whisper to her. A noble talks to his horse more than to his scribe. She responds, slightly. By the time you reach the stone marker at the bend, the one carved with faded letters no one can read, you realize the sun has dropped behind the hills. Everything is blue and silver now. Evening eats the sky, but just beyond the ridge you see the torches, and the sound, steel on steel, laughter, a cheer, the tournament grounds. You hadn't planned on stopping, but nobles from 3 counties are said to be here, and your name must be seen as often as it is heard. And besides, when was the last time you put your hand to a lance and not a ledger? You tie your mare to the post outside the tilt yard. Her breath comes in visible bursts, flaring through her nostrils like smoke from a spent forge. The field is alive, torches lit, banners snapping in the wind, the crowd humming with voices pitched between curiosity and bloodlust. You step toward the fence, boots sinking into churned earth that smells of wet hay, old leather, and sweat thick enough to hang in the air. The tournament has begun. This isn't a page from a romantic manuscript. There are no enchanted swords, no gallant verses recited before the tilt. Here, the armour is real, heavy, dented. You can hear the clank of chainmail under every breath, the laboured wheeze of a knight tightening his gauntlets, the squelch of a squire's boots dragging a whetstone through last night's mud. You watch as two horses charge, shields raised, lances extended. The impact is deafening. Wood cracks. One rider recoils, barely managing to stay in the saddle. The other, he spirals to the side, armour dragging him like a netted boar. Dust clouds the air. A helmet rolls into the straw. A gasp rises from the crowd, and then laughter, cheers. Coins are exchanged behind backs. You wince. This is entertainment. This is war in miniature, and you're supposed to smile through it. You look to your left. Sir Cedric, your oldest companion, raised together since the age of 7. He once pulled you from an icy river and lost a toenail for the trouble. Now he wears your colours, your crest, stitched into the blue and gold fabric over his chainmail. His beard is neatly trimmed, his expression unreadable. Are you sure about this? You ask him. He shrugs. It's just a show. But you know better. These tournaments are not games. They're training grounds for ambition, for rivalry, for revenge. Cedric climbs onto his destrier, coal-black, massive, trained for blood and thunder. The squire checks the cinch. Cedric lowers his visor with a practiced flick, and for a moment you see nothing but steel and silence. A trumpet sounds. The lists clear. You take your place in the viewing stand, half shaded under a striped canopy, seated beside other lords and their brooding heirs. Behind you, a noblewoman fans herself with a handkerchief that smells faintly of lavender and wine. Below, the combat begins. Cedric's first opponent falls easily, the second less so. There's a hesitation in Cedric's left swing, an old shoulder injury you remember, hidden beneath bravado and plate. He compensates, but you see it. A tightening of the back, a glance down. By the fourth tilt, the crowd grows restless. The fifth brings a challenger in red, Sir Ivo of Daromir. Younger, faster, rumoured to be desperate for land and title. They ride, once, twice. Wood splinters, sparks fly. Ivo leans forward, too far. Cedric shifts, angles his shield. Then, on the third pass, it happens. A sound not like wood or armour or cheering, a crack, and a silence. Cedric's lance misses. Ivo's strikes squarely on the chest plate. Cedric's horse falters. His body arcs through the air, slow, twisted. He hits the ground with a thud that reverberates through your ribs. Dust rises. People rise. But Cedric does not. You leap from the viewing stand. The roar of the crowd fades into a dull hum behind your ears as you rush across the field. Cedric lies motionless, his armour sunk half into the dirt. His destrier circles anxiously nearby, reins trailing like ribbons. 2 squires are already beside him, shouting his name. You kneel. His visor is dented, twisted. You lift it slowly. His eyes are closed. Breath comes shallow, just enough to fog the inside of the helm. Alive. For now. Get the physician, you command. No one asks which one. There is only one. An hour later, you find yourself in the chamber adjacent to the stables. More storage room than infirmary. The walls are stone, cold and uneven, smelling of straw, wet wool and copper. A brazier burns in the corner, too weak to push back the chill. Cedric lies on a low wooden table, armour stripped, tunic cut away, chest bare and bruised. A welt blooms across his ribs, angry and purple. His breath rattles like gravel in a bucket. Then the physician arrives. Master Reynold, not a doctor by any modern standard, not even by the churches. But he studied under monks, seen wounds on crusaders, and carries with him the confidence of one who has bled more men than he saved. He opens his leather satchel. Inside, iron instruments dulled by time, tweezers, hooks, bone needles, a tiny saw, a jar of leeches squirming in cloudy water, linen wraps stiff with old stains, a knife so thin it could whisper. You watch as he mutters a prayer and then holds Cedric's wrist, checking the pulse. Not with a clock, of course, with his own breath, timing exhalations. The humours are imbalanced, he says at last. We must let the bad blood out. You don't speak. You know better than to argue. You've heard of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, black bile. If anyone is too strong, illness follows. The only cure. Restore the balance. He heats the knife in the brazier. The metal glows dull red. Cedric groans. His eyes flutter, then close again. You grip his hand. He doesn't squeeze back. The blade touches skin. A thin line. Then a red well. Then a slow, steady drip into a wooden bowl. Steam curls upward. Reynold hums softly, as if coaxing the sickness out. You watch the blood pool, dark and sluggish. There, the man says. That will ease the pressure. Will it? There's no way to know. In the corner, a young page boils elder bark and dried nettles. Reynold adds a spoonful of powdered toadstool. The resulting broth is thick, greenish, bitter to the nose. He pours it between Cedric's lips with shaking hands. You know some of these herbs. Some ease pain. Some cause sleep. Some cause death if too much is given. There is no measurement, no science, only guesswork and God's mercy. Reynold sets leeches on Cedric's ankles, fat, slick creatures that latch with wet kisses. They swell as they feed. Your stomach tightens, but you remain still. This is what healing looks like here. No antiseptic, no stitching, no knowledge of bacteria, just bleeding, purging, poultices, and hope. Cedric sleeps or drifts. He can't tell. His breath is softer now, slower. You leave him in Reynold's hands. And as you step outside into the fading light, the wind cold against your cheeks, a servant approaches. My lord, he says, bowing. They've begun gathering for the evening judgment. The accused is ready. Accused? You had nearly forgotten. But of course, what's a feast without a trial? You follow the servant down the narrow corridor lit by torches, their flames bending slightly with every breeze sneaking through the stone cracks. The air smells of melted tallow and damp linen. Each footstep echoes, yours louder than his. You recognize this part of the keep, the lower hall, cold even in summer, built for echoes. Outside the chamber doors, a soldier nods once and pushes them open. The courtroom is not grand. It is not a courtroom at all. Just a wide chamber with a raised platform, a few wooden benches for the observers, and a creaking chair behind a scarred oaken table. Your seat. The floor is packed earth. The ceiling slopes low, oppressive. The walls sweat in winter. You take your place. The steward steps forward, parchment in hand, voice flat. 2 accused, theft and sorcery. You raise your eyebrows. One of those charges is expected. The other, less so. The first is a boy, no more than 15, thin as a sapling, face dirty, fingers inked from fruit, possibly stolen, possibly gathered, a piece of cloth tied around his ankle, part of an older tunic. His eyes don't meet yours. The reeve speaks. Took 2 hens from the castle coop. No blood spilled. The boy mutters something. You catch only, was hungry. You glance at the steward. He shrugs, caught in the act. You exhale slowly. Theft is theft. Punishment is usually whipping. 10 lashes, sometimes 15. But you know to the child's wrists, already bruised. Someone's been proactive. You say nothing. You nod once. 5 lashes, Bread for 3 days, assigned to the stable hands. A murmur spreads. You bang the wooden mallet once. Hard. Next, the guards bring her in. A woman, not old, but the way she walks, the way her eyes move, slowly, cautiously, without fear, makes her seem ancient. Her dress is rough wool, dyed in earth tones, stained at the hem. A string of carved wooden beads hangs from her wrist. She smells of sage and smoke. You already know what this is. A wise woman, an herb keeper, a midwife maybe, one who speaks too freely. The priest steps forward, lips thin. She was found with jars of powder, ash and bone, and written charms. Several townsfolk claim illness after speaking with her. One child recovered after being denied her remedies. You raise your hand. Was she paid? The priest hesitates. Not in coin. Chickens. Clotha bartered healer. No license. No protection from the church. You look at her. She looks back. Eyes like riverbed stones. Quiet. Weathered. You've heard stories like this before. They start with herbs. Then come the rumors. Then come the charges. Sorcery. Malice. Pact with the devil. Sometimes all it takes is a sickness in the village and a name someone didn't like. You speak directly. What were you doing with the powders? Her voice is soft. Keeping fever from babies, strengthening broth for the weak, sores, coughs. You lean forward. And the charms? She lifts the bead slightly. Prayer verses, written in Latin. Some I cannot read. The steward steps closer, whispers, "This could go badly. If you pardon her, the church may protest. If you punish her too harshly, the villagers may turn." She's known. You know what he's not saying. That this is not about truth or evidence. This is about fear. Yours. Theirs. Everyone's. The room holds its breath. All eyes turn to you. And you, highborn, sworn to protect the land, to uphold the peace, must choose. Do you see a healer or a witch? You don't answer her. Not at first. You sit in silence, hands folded over the edge of the judgment table, eyes steady on hers. Her gaze doesn't flinch. The rest of the room, however, has fallen into that particular stillness that only fear can conjure. One priest clutches his beads. A scribe holds his quill in the air, frozen, mid-stroke. Even the guards, those grim-faced men of iron, shift their weight more than usual. You know this atmosphere. It's older than the church, deeper than law. This is the air people breathe when they believe the devil walks near. Eventually, you stand. Let her be watched, you say. No punishment, no pardon. For now. Gasps, but no protest, because no one wants to be the one to object. She bows, once, then vanishes through the doors like smoke from a cold hearth. But her presence lingers. Even hours later, when you return to your chamber and strip off the heavy layers of cloth, you still feel her eyes. You try to shake the sensation, but it clings like mist to your shoulders. So you do what many in your time would do. You reach for the talisman hanging beside your bed, a polished bit of bone carved with a spiral, given to you by an old nursemaid who claimed it protected against night terrors. You never believed it until the nightmares stopped. Coincidence or magic? You've never dared to find out. Because in this world, superstition is not weakness, it's armor. You've seen it in every village. Laurel branches over doorways, iron nails driven into trees to ward off spirits, bread crusts buried under the threshold to keep away the restless dead, herbs hung from rafters, salt circles drawn in secret. You remember one man, a miller, who refused to open his windows after dark, said shadows whispered to him. 2 weeks later he vanished. The villagers said it was wolves. The priest said sin. The children said the woman who lived near the marsh called him away. Everyone agreed it was best not to ask. The truth is simple. People here do not fear witches. They fear not knowing who the witch is. Anyone can be accused. A widow, a midwife, a servant who prays too often, a woman who doesn't cry at her husband's funeral, a child who speaks of dreams too clearly. Evidence is rarely needed. Suspicion spreads faster than fire, and once lit, no one dares try to extinguish it. Because what if the stories are true? What if that cow died because she glanced at it? What if your cough lasted 3 days because she passed you in the square? What if that night you lost your way and wandered? It was because she muttered something under her breath as you rode past. It's easier to believe in curses than to accept chaos. And so, fear becomes ritual. You cross yourself before sleeping. You touch the talisman. You whisper a prayer that is half Latin, half nursery rhyme. You don't light the candle too close to the curtain. You don't drink from the chipped goblet, just in case. You don't believe in magic. Of course you don't. But tonight, when the wind whistles under the shutter and the fire in the grate flickers for no reason, you stare longer than you should, and you wonder, how far can superstition bend before it breaks into law? After days spent among whispers, wounds, and winter wind, a feast seems almost like mercy. You host it reluctantly, a show of order, a statement to your court that the realm still stands. Bread is baked, torches are set, minstrels paid in advance. You instruct the steward to call for game, not grain, to give the impression of abundance, even if the larders moan in protest. By sundown, the great hall is dressed in gold. Banners hang from every beam. Tallow candles drip lazily down iron holders, casting flickering light across the faces of those already seated. Lesser lords, landowners, favoured knights. Their faces are red from the fire, shiny with anticipation. Eyes bouncing from platter to goblet like hungry dogs. You enter last, always last. Your seat is high-backed, carved with lions and thistles, slightly too tall to rest your feet comfortably. You sit as expected, nod where needed, raise your goblet in blessing. The first course is served, and the illusion begins to crack. The stew is watery, oversalted. The venison, though rich in colour, is tough at the bone, likely caught late or stored poorly. The bread is uneven, one half undercooked, the other a brick. Wine flows, yes, but the casks were opened 2 days too soon, and the sourness clings to your tongue like bad news. No one complains, of course. That would be impolite. Instead, they chew slowly. Swallow. Sip again. You see the flicker of eyes between lords, calculating, judging. Not the taste, but what it means. A feast is never just a meal. It's a mirror. The musicians begin to play, a string of cheerful notes plucked on lute and pipes. But the rhythm stumbles. One string snaps mid-song. A child claps too loudly. Someone laughs alone. You look down the table. Sir Gervain spills wine across his sleeve and doesn't notice. Lady Mask glares at her cousin across the roast. The priest eats in silence, fingers greasy, lips moving with private prayers between each bite. Your own goblet remains mostly full. You try the pheasant. It's cold in the middle. Your stomach churns, not from the food, but from the sense that this room, so full of colour and noise, is held together by threads thin enough to snap with a breath. A servant trips. A tray clatters to the floor. The hall hushes briefly, then erupts in laughter. Forced, sharp, you smile. And then, just as the minstrels shift to a livelier tune, the door slams open. Wind rushes in. Candles flicker. A man stands in the entryway, cloaked, soaked from shoulder to toe. Mud clings to his boots. His breath comes in gusts, fogging the air. A messenger. He doesn't bow. He walks straight toward you, boots echoing across stone. "My lord," he says, loud enough for all to hear. He holds out a parchment. This came from the northern watchtower. You take it, fingers tightening. The seal is broken. Your eyes scan the words. You stop breathing for a heartbeat, because the message is short, and it begins with a name you hope never to hear again. You unroll the message with careful fingers. The ink is blurred in places, rain perhaps, or a shaking hand. But the name at the top is clear. Lord Anselm of Wexley, a name that hasn't crossed your lips in 2 years. Not since the treaty was sealed with bread, salt, and a lie. He has crossed the river. Again. You read the rest. Scouts confirm movement. 50 riders, armed, cloaked, moving south. Not a raid, a statement. You fold the parchment, and the feast ends. Before the torches gutter out, before the wine settles in your guests' bellies, you rise. The steward doesn't need instructions. He disappears like smoke. You leave through the side door. There's no time to sleep. War has its own appetite. By dawn, the courtyard is filled with voices. The sharp clash of hammer on iron, the creak of saddles, the mutter of scribes counting heads, names, obligations. You smell sweat before the sun rises, fresh, urgent, layered with the tang of hot steel and wood smoke. You stand beneath the tower, cloak pulled against the wind. This is how it begins. Not with a trumpet, not with honor, with numbers, with wool, with barley, with men who would rather be elsewhere. The levy is called. Your vassals must answer. Each must provide a set number of able-bodied men. The blacksmiths reforge rusted swords. Fletchers carve arrows from green wood. The stable hands pull war horses from stalls, brushing them in silence. You watch them prepare. You see their fingers, raw from winter labor, struggling to tighten straps. You see the boy who lied about his age, clutching a spear longer than he is tall. You see the older man with one eye who comes anyway, because his son is gone and there's no one else to stand in his place. The armorer opens his chest of mail. Some hauberks are too small, others too heavy. There's no time to fit them all. Leather stiff with old blood is bent back into shape. Shields are repainted, most are cracked. One of your knights, Sir Roland, asks for new horseshoes. His stallion limps. The farrier shakes his head. No iron to spare. You authorize the melting of church gates. God will forgive you, you hope. Food is the next concern. The stores were already low. Feeding an army means not feeding your castle. Women begin baking black bread with coarse rye and bits of dried root. Salt meat is stretched thinner than parchment. Fish is caught in freezing streams, smoked over fast fires. Morale is not a word your people use. They talk in silence, in glances, in pace. You visit the chapel, not to pray, but to think. War needs more than swords. It needs grain. It needs rows that haven't collapsed in the frost. It needs someone to hold the line when your own hands shake. You speak to your captain. He tells you what you already know. We ride at dawn. You nod, but then he hesitates. There's more, my lord, he says, voice low, from the village north of the river. You raise an eyebrow. He leans in. They say Wexley's men wear no colours, and they carry no banners, but they burn everything behind them. You say nothing, because you know what that means. But what do you call a war, when the enemy does not even show you his flag? You don't remember when the siege began. Not exactly. At first, it was just scouts spotted near the woods, then smoke in the distance, then a burned village. By the time the first arrows landed near the outer wall, the gate was already shut. That was 17 days ago. Now, you wake each morning to the same stale taste in your mouth and the creak of ropes under tension. The air inside the keep is still, not silent, just resigned, the kind of quiet that holds its breath too long. You haven't seen the sun in 3 days. The tower windows are shuttered. The sky always seems grey. Even when you step outside to the battlements, the horizon is a smudge of smoke and frozen mist. The courtyard has become a ritual. Every morning, someone counts the bread. What's left, how hard it's grown, how thin it can be sliced. A single wheel of cheese was found with mould. Half of it had to be scraped, the rest saved for the garrison. You ordered the chicken slaughtered first, then the pigs, then the hunting dogs. No one touches the horses yet, not yet. Water is drawn from the cistern. It's tinged with iron and something sour. The healer adds thyme and crushed charcoal. It helps a little. The people still inside, the cooks, the scribes, the steward's children, sit huddled in wool, their eyes red, their voices soft. No one wants to ask questions that begin with "how long?" Outside, the enemy waits. You've seen them only once, when they rode past the southern wall, torches raised, laughing. They didn't attack. They don't need to. Time fights for them. At night, the moans begin. Sick men, curled in their blankets, coughing into cloth. One died yesterday, a wound that festered. Another tried to leap from the wall but was pulled back. You have to walk the perimeter twice daily, not because it helps, but because if they see you standing, others will keep standing too. Your armor feels heavier each day. The padding inside reeks of sweat. You no longer bother changing the linen. No one does. Yesterday, a child found a rat in the corner of the chapel. She tried to hide it, but someone saw. There was a fight, over bones. You wake before the bell now, not because of duty, but because of dreams. Dreams where the walls fall in silence. Dreams where the enemy is not outside, but already walking the halls. You wonder how many inside would open the gate just to end the waiting. And then, tonight, it happens. You're sitting beside the hearth in the great hall. There is no fire, just embers and the memory of warmth. You're sipping broth that tastes like boiled rope. And then it comes, a sound that does not belong. Wood, breaking, a deep, resonant crack. One of the guards leaps to his feet. Another drops the cup from his hands. You stand. The sound comes again. Not a scream, not a horn. The sound of the gate, great oak, iron-bound, tested now beyond its patience. You look toward the door, and you wonder, are they already inside? You were still standing when the gates gave way. It wasn't cinematic. There was no final charge, just the sound of wood groaning, splitting. Then open air and boots on stone. Chaos flooded in. You remember shouting, not yours. The clang of steel meeting steel. A scream that didn't sound human. Then black. When you wake, your face is pressed to packed dirt. The smell is the first thing. Sweat, rust, mud thick with ash. You move slowly, and something tugs at your neck. A chain. Thin, not tight, but present. A suggestion of ownership. You lift your head. You're in a cellar, not yours. The stones are older, damp. Mold creeps along the mortar like veins beneath sick skin. One slit of light cuts the wall, sun maybe, or torchlight from above. Around you, silence punctuated by a cough, a groan. Someone else is here. You sit up. Your tunic is torn. The hem soaked with something darker than water. Your boots are gone. Your hands, no longer gloved, bear small cuts, one of them still bleeding. A door creaks open. A man enters. He's not armoured, but his coat bears the sigil of Wexley. Thin as a reed, he walks with deliberate steps and carries nothing but a ledger and a knife. One to write your fate, the other to encourage clarity. He doesn't speak right away, just looks at you, then down at the chain. then at your face again. Name? He asks. You don't answer. He already knows. Still, it's a ritual. He writes it anyway. And then, terms of ransom will be discussed. He leaves. No gloating, no threats, just facts. That's what you are now, a fact. You learn quickly. You are fed twice daily. Thin broth, grey bread, water that tastes of tin. Your arms ache from cold. Your back itches from straw. Sleep comes in bursts, interrupted by shouting above or the sudden clatter of boots near your door. Sometimes they bring another. Once, a night. Another time, a boy from your kitchen staff. Neither stays long. You hear rumours from guards, whispers of your lands being reassigned, of taxes being levied in your name, of a cousin who's acting on your behalf, of letters never sent. Your captors are polite, terrifyingly so. They speak in measured tones. They let you walk the perimeter of the courtyard, once per day, always chained, always watched. You think of honour, of vows, of the songs they sang about brave captains and noble prisoners. You try not to laugh, because here there is no nobility, only rank, weight in silver, letters between stewards. You are not held because of what you did. You are held because someone else might pay for you. And until that price is set, you exist in suspension. You begin to lose track of days. The light through the slit shifts, but never clearly. You wait. For word, for coin, for someone to decide your value. And then one morning, as you sip cold water from a bowl, chipped at the edge, the guard clears his throat. There's been an answer, he says. He pauses. But it's not what we expected. You're not escorted home. You're not even returned with fanfare. You're left, at a crossroads, just past the northern border. A horse, a cloak, and a sealed letter, stamped with wax, but unsigned. It says you've been released without ransom, a token of future understanding. It feels less like a gift and more like a warning. The ride back takes 3 days. The landscape is quieter than you remember. Villages you once passed through with guards and flags now watch you from behind closed shutters. No cheers, no greetings, just the occasional dog barking from a rooftop. When you finally see the towers of your keep through the trees, your chest tightens. Because something is wrong. The gates are open, not wide, but enough to make you slow. The guard at the entrance is new, young, nervous. He recognizes your crest, but not your face. He waves you in without words. The courtyard is unfamiliar in all the ways that matter. Your steward doesn't greet you. No one does. Inside, dust has claimed what pride once polished. The great hall is half lit, the hearth cold. Tapestries hang crooked. 2 chairs sit overturned near the dais. Someone has moved the long table. You don't know why. You pass servants who look down when they see you. Some pause, open their mouths, and close them again. Your name still carries weight, but not certainty. You find the steward, finally, in the scribe's chamber. He stands too quickly, knocking over a stack of ledgers. His eyes are puffy, his tunic wrinkled. "My lord," he stammers. You raise a hand. "Speak plainly." And so he does. The lands have suffered. The southern fields, once tilled by bonded tenants, were claimed during your absence. Your cousin, named regent in your stead, levied new taxes, drove families to leave, and sold 3 parcels to cover debts. The northern watchtower fell. No response was sent. Merchants now ride elsewhere. Fewer carts, less silver. The well in the western village has gone dry. You close your eyes. A kingdom, eroded not by war, but by months of mismanagement. It's still yours, but it limps. Later that night, you walk through the castle, room by room. The kitchen smells of stale grain, the chapel of wax and mildew, your own chamber of long-sealed stone. The sheets have been changed, but not recently. You lie awake for hours. When morning comes, you dress without ceremony. The council is small now, 2 knights, a priest, the steward, and a man you don't recognize, lean, grey, with ink-stained fingers. A notary sent from the capital, apparently, appointed during your absence. You listen to their reports. You nod when expected, but inside a single question repeats. What now? You are back, but you are not whole, not in body, not in name, not in reach. The steward clears his throat. My lord, he says carefully, there is one possibility. You turn to him. He meets your eyes. There is land, across the sea, a chance to begin again, quietly, profitably, under another name, if needed. He lets the suggestion hang in the cold morning air. Would you leave everything to save what's left of yourself? The ink on your new title is still wet when they bring her name. Lady Celestria of Velwyn. Daughter of a coastal baron with ships you need, cousins you don't want, and land you've never seen. Her dowry is generous. Grain, silver, and the promise of 10 armed men. The arrangement, they say, will restore confidence. The match reflects stability. Your steward says the word duty more times than your name. You agree, because refusal means starting over again in every sense. The wedding is quick, the ceremony short. A priest you don't recognize speaks over your heads while half the room glances sideways, calculating the worth of each guest. The wine is sweet but thin. The bread breaks too easily. She says nothing when the veil is lifted. You study her face, not for beauty, but for clues. She looks young, but her expression is older, wary, sharp. She nods once, but the gesture is not for you. It's for the room. Afterward, you're escorted to the solar. Your chambers smell of fresh rushes and lavender, but the fire is low. She sits by the hearth, fingers folded. You don't touch her. You talk. Not of dreams, but borders. Not of love, but logistics. Her father expects you to invest in his port. Your steward expects her to produce an heir. Expectations are the only currency exchanged. The weeks pass. You live together, but not as lovers. Meals are shared. Words are chosen. You see each other at council, in the gardens, in silence. Her voice is precise. She reads documents before you do. She corrects your steward in front of others, and they listen. You begin to admire her mind. You also begin to resent it. You catch your knights weighing her words. You catch yourself doing the same. Once, she orders a shipment redirected from your own stores, and you approve it without question. You don't remember when the last decision was fully yours. One night, she enters your study. There's news, she says. She hands you a letter. Her cousin has died. The coastal estate stands empty. She wishes to claim it for your future son. You stare at her. You're pregnant, you ask. She raises an eyebrow. Not yet. She turns, leaves, and does not look back. You spend that night in the great hall, staring at the fire. By morning, you summon your steward. Is there any other way? You ask. He doesn't answer, because there isn't. The next weeks bring guests, family, some yours, some hers. Discussions of lineage, priests, scribes, wine. Your bed is made every morning, but untouched. Gossip creeps through the halls like ivy. You begin to drink, not to forget, to soften the edges. And then, one day, you return from the stables to find her waiting in the hall. She holds a parchment, an official seal. My father, she says flatly, has named our future son heir to his estate. It bypasses my brothers, but only if we produce him before spring. She hands you the scroll, and if not, she meets your eyes. they will choose someone else. The letter still sits on your desk. You haven't touched it in days. Because now, every step echoes down the stone corridors like a decision you haven't made yet. The household walks softer. Voices drop when you enter a room. Servants stop humming. Even the fire in the hearth seems to crackle with caution. She's with child. It was confirmed 2 months ago. And now it begins. The midwife came last night. 2 more women followed, herbalists. One carries a pouch of fennel and sage. Another sharpens a blade in silence. A priest waits in the chapel. You didn't summon him. The hall outside your chamber is lined with old faces. The steward, the notary, one of her cousins, all waiting, all still. You don't know what to do with your hands. Inside, beyond the thick wooden door, is noise, but not the kind you understand. Wet, muffled, human. The screams come in waves, not hers, theirs, all of them. Voices overlapping like a storm breaking over stone. You pace the corridor. You count the torches, the hours, the gaps between sounds. A maid brings a basin. She leaves it by the wall. Later, a cloth, red. You stop looking. You remember what you've heard. What men whisper when the ale flows. That childbirth is war without armor. That a noble woman is worth more with a son, and worth nothing if she dies too soon. That a cry at the end is a blessing. That silence is the worst of all. The steward approaches. Do you wish to go to the chapel? He asks. You shake your head, because prayer feels dishonest, and you do not want to make promises. Another hour passes. A door opens. One of the women steps out. Her hands are red to the wrists. She looks at you, but does not speak, then closes the door again. You try not to imagine what lies beyond it. You think of the window in your study, of the sea beyond it, of names, lineages, paper sealed with wax and cold hands. You think of all the sons who were born and died nameless, of all the mothers who bled until the walls themselves remembered their warmth. And then, a cry, sharp, piercing. One voice, small, but unmistakably alive. You do not run, you walk. The steward follows. Inside the chamber, heat clings to everything. Steam from the basin, smoke from the herbs, blood on the floor. The women part like tide around you. She lies on the bed, pale but breathing. The child swaddled in cloth, red, then white. The midwife nods. A boy. You don't hold him, not yet. You sit beside the bed. Her eyes flicker, open. Her voice is faint. You'll name him. You nod. But the name won't come, because you feel it. This child isn't just yours. He belongs to every agreement made in ink, every land promised, every mouth waiting to inherit. And then the priest enters. He carries oil, and the look on his face isn't joy, it's urgency. Shall we bless him now? He asks. You turn, because something's wrong. Why is the child so quiet again? The priest never answers your question. He takes the child, anoints his forehead, speaks words you almost recognize, and hands him back without meeting your gaze. That night, you sleep little, not because of the child, but because of the silence, because the stillness feels like judgment. The chapel is cold at dawn. You step inside before the candles are lit. The stone breathes around you, exhaling centuries of prayer, fear, and confession. You kneel before the altar, not because you want to, but because something in you whispers that you must. Your knees ache against the stone. Your hands tremble. You don't know what you're asking for. Forgiveness, safety, time. The priest enters later. He nods without words, draws the sign of the cross in the air, and begins to chant. You don't join in. You just listen. Because somewhere deep in your chest is the knowledge that you haven't done enough. Not for her. not for the child, not for the people who still call you Lord. And so you begin. Daily prayers, morning vigils, donations to the abbey, land granted for monasteries, bread for the poor. You commission a mass for your grandfather, another for your late cousin, another still for yourself, while you're still alive. You ask the priest to explain purgatory again. He does, with detail. You imagine the fire, the pain, the years stretched long beyond counting. You imagine your son dying young, unbaptized. You imagine her dying without last rites. You imagine yourself alone, surrounded by smoke and silence, unable to speak your guilt because it no longer matters. And so you give more. You fast. You wear rough cloth under your tunic. You confess things that may not even be sins. A night spent laughing too loudly, a sharp word toward your steward, a lie told to your cousin. You flagellate yourself, not with whips, but with memory. The monks are pleased. The priest offers private absolution. Your wife says little, but you notice her prayers grow longer. She lights candles when she thinks you don't see. Your child is quiet, too quiet. You worry that his silence is a mark, a sign. You hold him longer now. You say blessings over his sleep. And one night, in the stillness, you ask the question you've been afraid to shape aloud. Is he cursed? The priest blinks. He doesn't answer, just places his hand on your shoulder and leaves you in the dark. The next morning, you rise before the bells. You walk the long path to the high chapel at the edge of your land. There, on a hill of stone, beneath a sky that still refuses to speak, you kneel again. You whisper your name, your sins, and a new promise. Because if the child lives, if he thrives, you will build a church in his name. But what if God does not hear you? The silence of the chapel never leaves you, even as spring creeps in, even as your child gains weight, and your wife begins to walk farther down the garden paths. You wake early still, but now, out of restlessness, not prayer. And so, when the steward mentions the hunt, you nod, without thinking, without hesitation, because some instincts still survive. The horses are restless beneath the grey sky. Their breath clouds the morning air, rising like smoke from a battlefield. Hounds pace and howl. Spears are checked, arrows fletched. Young men mount with excitement in their blood. You, though, remain still. The fur lining your cloak itches. The weight of the bow at your side is familiar, but not comfortable. You haven't used it in months. Not since the first snowfall. Not since the world was different. They say the forest is thick today. The deer are farther east. The boars bolder. The paths wetter. You ride anyway. Branches claw at your arms. Mud cakes your boots. The sound of hooves muffles the world. It is almost peaceful. Until the horn blows. Short, sharp, urgent. The dogs bolt. Men scatter. You follow, but slower, because something feels wrong. The woods seem closer than they were. The sky darker. The air sharper. And then, movement. A flash of brown fur between the trees. Your horse rears. You steady him. Raise your bow. But the shot is late. The animal is gone. Your men cheer in the distance. You don't join them, because you've lost it. You ride on alone, and that's when the scream comes. High, human. You wheel your horse and gallop. Branches whip your face. Your heart hammers against your ribs. You reach a clearing and stop. One of your knights is down, his leg twisted, his cloak soaked red. A boar lies beside him, pierced through the eye. The others circle, too stunned to speak. You dismount, kneel beside him. He's breathing, but barely. You shout for cloth, for wine, for a cart, and you remember. This was supposed to be sport. This was supposed to clear your head. Instead, it draws blood. The boar had turned too fast, had run not from the dogs, but toward the man. And now the sun begins to dip. The air chills, and your men look at you, not for commands, but for comfort. And you have none to give, because you remember other tales, of nobles killed by stags, of princes thrown from horses, of kings gored while laughing. And now this, another life offered to tradition, another name to carve on a cold stone. You mount again, slower this time. The hunt is over, but you keep riding, because something calls you east, away from the estate, away from the chapel, towards something you haven't named yet. Perhaps it's penance, perhaps it's fear, or perhaps it's the road itself that's waiting. But what do you seek now that you cannot pray away? The road leads not to penance, but to noise. The village is alight with torches, banners, the smells of roasting meat and ale, the shrieks of children chasing chickens between carts. A festival, one you forgot was coming, spills out from the square like overboiled stew. Laughter collides with music, laughter tinged with something else. Desperation, perhaps. You dismount slowly. Your boots sink into soft mud and straw, soaked with what you hope is only beer. People greet you with two wide smiles. Women curtsy, men bow, children stare. And still, something's off. The jester stumbles in his shoes. The priest looks exhausted. The butcher has wine on his sleeves. You're offered a horn of cider. It's warm, sweet, too sweet. It sticks to your tongue like syrup and something older. You force a smile, raise it high, nod. A band of musicians start to play. Lutes, pipes, a drum far too loud for the space. Dancers gather, girls in ribbons, boys with scraped knees. You're swept forward toward the center before you can object. You try to enjoy it. You try. You watch the bread breaking, the blessing of the sheep, the ceremonial lighting of the bonfire. A mock duel between two drunk cousins. The crowd howls. It should be joyful. It's meant to be. And yet you can't stop noticing. The bread is stale. The ale is thin. The fire spits too much smoke. And someone vomits behind the grain wagon. You try again. You clasp hands with the steward's wife, spin once, smile. The music is faster now. People twirling, stomping, clapping, shouting, rising toward fever. And then a fight breaks out. Two young men, red-faced and swaying. Someone insulted someone else's sister, or cow, or pride. Punches are thrown, plates crash, a dog barks. You step back, no one notices, because this too is tradition. The priest tries to intervene. He's shoved. A woman screams, a chair breaks, and still the band plays. Because what else can they do? You find yourself back at your horse, alone. You watch as the crowd begins to fray. The fire burns lower. Ash clings to the air. The stars, finally visible, blink as if bored. You mount again, not from duty, not from fear, but because the taste of joy has gone sour. You ride quietly, past the square, past the broken table, past the boy crying over spilled turnips. This was meant to be celebration, a feast, a balm, but all you feel is the weight in your gut, and a question you haven't dared ask since spring. If this is how your people feast, then what does it mean to truly rejoice? You're slower now, not by much, not enough to speak of openly, but you notice it in the tilt of your step, the ache in your joints when the morning fog creeps through the cracks in the stone walls. You've started sleeping longer, but waking up more tired. You move to the window with the stiffness of old timber. Your breath clouds the glass. Below, your estate still moves. Peasants dragging carts. The steward gesturing at a broken fence. The cook scolding the boy for stealing eggs. But no one looks up. No one waits for your word before they act. There was a time, wasn't there, when your presence commanded silence. A time when one step into the hall quieted voices, straightened backs, stilled gossip. Now they nod politely. They bow too quickly. They vanish around corners as if they've said something they shouldn't. You eat in silence more often now. Evening meals are shorter. Guests excuse themselves earlier. Your own son arrives late and leaves early. He says he's tired from managing the accounts. He doesn't look at you when he says it. You notice it in small things. No one asks your opinion on the harvest anymore. No one asks whether to punish the blacksmith's boy. No one asks who should sit where at the feast. You're not sure when the turning began. Perhaps when your voice cracked during that last court hearing. Perhaps when you stumbled at the foot of the stairs and waved off help with more irritation than pride. Or perhaps it began the day your physician used the word decline, as if it were a polite cousin of death. The castle no longer smells of your choices. The torches are lit later now. The gate closes earlier. Candles are counted. There are whispers, of course. They think you don't hear them. They say your son plans to move his family into the main wing. They say the steward takes liberties with the grain stores. They say your niece writes to monks. Something about lands, about guardianship, about succession. You try to ask. You try. But your words land softer than they used to. You see it in their eyes. You're still noble, yes, but fragile now. Porcelain with a crown. So you take longer walks. You sit in the gardens and talk to no one. You read letters and never send replies. You carve small pieces of wood into animals and leave them on your writing desk, hoping someone will notice. The truth comes slowly, but it comes. You are no longer the fire in the hearth. You are the smoke curling above it. And it makes you wonder if all of this, the land, the banners, the lineages and vows, if they could be so easily reshaped in your absence. What remains of you when the last servant forgets to knock? You sit by the hearth, wrapped in wool, though the fire is low and the coals barely glow. The castle is quieter than it's ever been. Or perhaps you've simply grown more attuned to the silence. There are no more summons. No riders thundering through the gates with urgent news. No letters sealed with wax from lords demanding allegiance or apologies. Just the steady creak of the wooden beams above, and the wind pressing gently against the shutters like an old friend who no longer insists on entering. You breathe in the scent of old stone, dried herbs, and a trace of beeswax from the candle near your hand. The smell of time, of endings. You look around at the chamber. Everything is where you left it. The carved desk with its ink stains and parchments. The wall tapestry that's faded and fraying near the bottom edge. Your father's sword, never used by you in anger, resting high above the mantle. Too ceremonial, too heavy, too bound to other men's blood. You think about your choices. You remember the faces. Some are clearer than others. The cook who made stew too thin. The steward who always smirked. The nurse who once sang a lullaby in a dialect you never learned. The child you held, the friend you buried. The woman you were told to marry. And slowly, you ask yourself the question. Was it good? Was it worth it? You had land. You had power. You had fear. And feasts. And falcons. You rode beneath banners stitched with your family crest. And men stepped aside when your boot struck the stone. But you also remember cold rooms. You remember too much wine and too little laughter. You remember how long the winters felt, even surrounded by fur and flame. You remember how silence crept in, long before your limbs began to fail. You remember that being a lord didn't mean being free. You think of the peasants, the ones who bowed and cursed you in the same breath when your back was turned. You think of the rules you enforced, the taxes you raised, the hands you didn't hold. And still, it wasn't all sorrow. There were moments. A child's laugh in the snow, the sound of a lute echoing through a summer evening, the weight of a sleeping hound at your feet, the scent of bread, fresh and warm. At dawn, you close your eyes. There is no pain, not now. Only the heaviness of a body that has seen too many winters. Only the slow rhythm of a world that will move on without you. You hear footsteps in the corridor, but they do not stop. You hear bells far away, distant, soft, like memories ringing from a place beyond memory. And in this final hour, you understand something simple. Being a noble did not make you more than others. It only made you more watched. You draw in one last breath, not because you must, but because you can. And as your thoughts begin to drift, slow and steady like the snow beyond the window, you ask yourself, was this the life you would choose again? But you're already asleep, and sleep, here, at last, feels like peace.